February 1st, 1943. 4,000 feet above the North Sea, the bomber was dying, and Second Lieutenant John C. Red Morgan knew it. Fire streamed from the B-17F's No. 3 engine, orange flames trailing 20 feet behind the nacelle, the wind fanning the blaze into a horizontal torch that threatened to melt through the wing spar. The cockpit reeked of burning oil, cordite, and something worse, the sickly sweet smell of seared flesh. Blood covered the instrument panel in arterial sprays, making the gauges unreadable. The control yoke bucked in Morgan's hands like a living thing trying to escape, the damaged hydraulics sending shudders through the entire control system. In the right seat, First Lieutenant Robert L. Campbell slumped forward against his harness, unconscious, his face a mask of blood from the 20mm cannon shell that had exploded against the cockpit armor behind his head. Shrapnel had torn through Campbell's skull, his jaw, his throat. He should have been dead. Somehow he was still breathing, shallow, rattling breaths that bubbled pink foam through the wounds. The mission to bomb submarine pens at Saint-Nazaire, France, had gone to hell 30 minutes ago when Focke-Wulf 190s from Jagdgeschwader 2 hit their formation over the French coast. The first attack pass had killed the top turret gunner instantly, severed the rudder cables, and set the No. 3 engine on fire. The second pass wounded Campbell and knocked out the oxygen system. The third pass killed the ball turret gunner and shredded the vertical stabilizer. Standard procedure was clear. Bail out. Order the crew to abandon the aircraft. 9 men could escape with parachutes. A pilotless B-17 would plunge into the North Sea, taking no one with it. But Morgan looked at the altimeter. 3,800 feet and dropping. Then at Campbell, still breathing despite injuries that should have been instantly fatal. Then at the intercom panel, where he could hear the labored breathing of wounded men in the radio compartment, the waist, the tail section, men who might not be able to bail out, men who couldn't survive a parachute drop into the freezing North Sea. Morgan made his decision in less than 5 seconds, a decision that violated every regulation, defied every survival instinct, and contradicted all rational analysis of the aircraft's condition. He was going to fly this burning, crippled bomber back to England. He was going to land it, and he was going to save every man aboard. The North Sea, grey and cold beneath him, waited to claim another crew. Morgan pushed the throttles forward on the 3 remaining engines and pointed the dying B-17 toward home. What happened over the next 47 minutes would earn Morgan the Medal of Honor and rewrite Air Force doctrine on aircraft survival. It would also prove something the German pilots who attacked his bomber couldn't have imagined, that American determination, backed by American engineering, could achieve things that physics and probability said were impossible. The burning B-17 began its race against death. Behind it, a trail of smoke and fire marked its passage across 180 miles of hostile sky. The mission of February 1st, 1943, came at the darkest period of the American daylight bombing campaign over Europe. In the 6 months since the 8th Air Force had begun operations from England, losses had been catastrophic. Of the 91st Bomb Group's original 35 crews that deployed to England in September 1942, only 7 remained operational by February. The life expectancy of a B-17 crew completing a full 25 mission tour was calculated at less than 30%. The mathematics were brutal. Each mission meant flying through hundreds of miles of defended airspace, facing German fighters that had been perfecting their bomber-killing tactics since 1939, then running a gauntlet of flak over the target that could reach altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet. A single 88mm flak shell, exploding within 50 feet of a bomber, could shred the aircraft with thousands of steel fragments traveling at supersonic velocities. The B-17 Flying Fortress, despite its name and reputation, was fundamentally vulnerable. Its 4 Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines, while reliable, had no armor protection. A single 20mm cannon shell through a cylinder head would destroy an engine instantly. The fuel tanks, despite self-sealing technology, could still catch fire under sustained attack. The control cables, running the length of the 74-foot fuselage, were exposed to battle damage throughout their runs. Sever enough cables, and the aircraft became uncontrollable. Yet the B-17 had one quality that saved more crews than any other design feature: structural strength. The airframe could absorb incredible punishment and continue flying. Wings could be shredded, tail sections shot away, entire control surfaces destroyed, and the bomber would stay airborne long enough for the crew to bail out or, in rare cases, reach friendly territory. But staying airborne and landing safely were entirely different propositions. A B-17, too damaged to land but still flying, could at least give its crew a chance to parachute to safety. A pilot who attempted to land a critically damaged bomber risked killing the entire crew in a crash that might otherwise have been survivable via bailout. This is why Red Morgan's decision was so extraordinary and so controversial. By choosing to fly the aircraft home rather than order bailout, he was gambling 9 lives on his ability to control a bomber that, by any objective assessment, was unflyable. The story of that flight would become legendary within the 8th Air Force. It would be studied by flight instructors, analyzed by aircraft engineers, and cited in survival manuals. It would prove that the line between possible and impossible in aerial combat was often determined not by the aircraft's condition, but by the pilot's refusal to accept defeat. John Carey Morgan was never supposed to be a bomber pilot. The 27-year-old Texan from Vernon had enlisted in the Army Air Corps in 1940 with dreams of flying fighters, of aerial duels, and individual glory. Instead, the Air Corps, desperate for bomber pilots as war approached, assigned him to multi-engine training. Morgan hated it initially. "I wanted to fly Mustangs or Thunderbolts," he recalled in a 1985 interview. "I wanted to be the guy in the dogfight. Instead, they stuck me in a bomber that flew straight and level while people shot at it. I felt like I'd been assigned to drive a bus through a shooting gallery." But Morgan discovered he had a gift for formation flying and crew coordination. By the time he received his wings in April 1942, he'd developed a reputation as a pilot who could put a B-17 exactly where it needed to be, maintaining precise position through weather, turbulence, and simulated combat maneuvers. His co-pilot, Robert Campbell, was Morgan's opposite in temperament. Where Morgan was aggressive and impatient, Campbell was methodical and calm. At 24, Campbell was younger than Morgan but had more flight time, having worked as a civilian flight instructor before the war. The two men had flown together for 6 months, developing the wordless communication that defines effective flight crews. Their B-17F, serial number 42-5077, named Ruthie, after Campbell's wife, was new, delivered to the 326th Bomb Squadron, 92nd Bomb Group in December 1942, with only 11 hours of factory test time. The aircraft incorporated the latest modifications: additional armor plating around the cockpit, upgraded oxygen systems, and improved defensive armament, including twin .50 caliber machine guns in the nose position. The crew of 9 had trained together stateside for 5 months. They were young, average age 22, and inexperienced. The mission on February 1st was their 4th combat operation. They'd flown to Saint-Nazaire twice before, to Lorient once. Those missions had been relatively uneventful, light flak and sporadic fighter attacks that the formation's defensive fire had driven off. The mission briefing at 0400 hours on February 1st had warned them this one would be different. Saint-Nazaire's submarine pens were priority targets, heavily defended by both flak batteries and dedicated fighter units. Intelligence estimated they'd face 50 to 60 German fighters on the route. The briefing officer's final words were grimly prophetic. "Today, we're going to earn our pay." The Focke-Wulf 190s came out of the sun at 11:27 hours, 8 aircraft from 2/JG2 led by Hauptmann Erich Hohagen, an ace with 42 kills who specialized in bomber attacks. The German tactics were refined through 2 years of trial and error. Attack from 12 o'clock high, diving through the formation at 400 miles per hour, firing 20mm cannon and 13mm machine guns in concentrated bursts aimed at the cockpit and engines. The closure rate, bomber at 180 miles per hour, fighter at 400 miles per hour, gave defensive gunners less than 2 seconds to track and fire. Most couldn't react in time. Staff Sergeant Keith Koska, in Ruthie's top turret, saw them coming and opened fire at 1,200 yards, his twin .50 calibers sending tracers arcing into the sky. The other gunners joined in, the B-17 shuddering from the recoil of 6 defensive positions, firing simultaneously. The attacking FW-190s flew through a cloud of tracers, most missing, some hitting, but doing no damage to the heavily armored German fighters. Then Hohagen opened fire. The 20mm cannon rounds walked up Ruthie's nose, punching through the plexiglass bombardier's compartment, killing Second Lieutenant William Watts instantly. The burst continued into the cockpit, exploding against the armor plate behind Campbell's seat. Shrapnel tore through Campbell's head and upper body. He slumped forward, blood pouring from multiple wounds, his hands falling from the controls. Morgan, focused on maintaining formation position, felt the control yoke jerk violently as Campbell's unconscious body fell against it. The B-17 rolled hard right and nosed down. Morgan grabbed the yoke with both hands, fighting Campbell's dead weight, and hauled the bomber back to level flight. "Campbell's hit," Morgan transmitted on intercom. "How bad?" Technical Sergeant Henry Haas, the flight engineer who had climbed down from the top turret to assess damage, keyed his mic. "Bad, sir. Real bad. Head wounds. He's unconscious but breathing. Do we bail out?" Morgan looked at the instrument panel, now half obscured by Campbell's blood. Number 3 engine was trailing smoke, oil pressure dropping on number 4, hydraulic pressure at 0, oxygen system showing red indicators across the board. Before he could answer, the second attack came. This time, 4 FW-19s attacked from 6 o'clock level, the classic stern attack that gave tail and waist gunners their best defensive fire opportunity. Staff Sergeant Tyre Weaver in the tail position, and Sergeants John Foley and Asa Irwin in the waist opened up simultaneously, filling the sky behind Ruthie with .50 caliber rounds. One FW-190 exploded, hit by converging fire from all 3 positions, but the other 3 pressed their attacks, cannon and machine gun fire ripping through Ruthie's fuselage. Foley went down with leg wounds. The ball turret gunner, Sergeant Robert Boyer, reported his position was jammed. The hydraulic system shot out, leaving him trapped in the sphere beneath the aircraft. Then number 3 engine caught fire. The cowling split open, orange flames boiling out, and suddenly Morgan was flying a bomber that was burning, bleeding hydraulic fluid, venting oxygen, and carrying 2 seriously wounded men, plus 1 trapped in the ball turret. "All crew, pilot, prepare to bail," Morgan began the standard abandon aircraft order. Campbell's hand moved, just slightly, fingers twitching against the blood-soaked harness, still alive. Morgan looked at the altimeter. 4,200 feet. Looked at the North Sea below, grey and cold. Looked at Campbell, unconscious and dying, but still breathing. He made his decision. "Belay that. We're taking her home. Flight engineer, get up here. I need you to hold Campbell off the controls." What followed tested the limits of human endurance and aircraft structural integrity. With Haas holding Campbell's unconscious body back in the co-pilot's seat, Morgan flew the damaged B-17 alone, managing throttles, trim, and flight controls while navigating back to England without functioning instruments. The blood-covered gauges were unreadable. The magnetic compass had been destroyed. The radio compass was dead. Morgan navigated by dead reckoning and the position of the sun, maintaining heading by reference to the wing's shadow on the cockpit floor. The fire in number 3 engine burned for 22 minutes before the fuel supply exhausted and the flames died. By then, the engine nacelle was melted, the wing skin blackened and buckled. Engineers would later determine the wing spar had been heated to within 100 degrees of structural failure temperature. At 1,000 feet over the North Sea, with the English coast finally visible, number 4 engine failed. The propeller windmilled briefly, then seized, the reduction gear destroyed by oil starvation. Morgan now had 2 engines on the left wing, none on the right. The asymmetric thrust tried to roll the aircraft inverted. Morgan stood on the left rudder pedal, both hands locked on the control yoke, physically holding the bomber level. "Sir, we're not going to make it," Haas said, watching the altimeter unwind through 800 feet. "We're already dead if we ditch," Morgan replied through gritted teeth. "Campbell can't survive a water landing. Neither can Boyer in that jammed ball turret. We land this on a runway, or we don't land at all." The emergency landing at RAF Ludum, broadcast on all frequencies, brought the entire base to the runway. Crash crews stood ready. Ambulances positioned themselves along the approach path. Ground personnel watched in horrified fascination as the smoking, asymmetric B-17 lined up on final approach. Morgan had no hydraulics for brakes or flaps, no way to extend the landing gear normally. Haas and the crew manually cranked the gear down using the emergency system, a process requiring 30 minutes of sustained effort that left them exhausted. The landing, at 140 miles per hour with no flaps, no brakes, only 2 engines providing minimal control, should have been impossible. The B-17 touched down 1,000 feet past the runway threshold, bounced once, settled, and rolled. Morgan cut the remaining engines and used the grass overrun to slow the aircraft, finally stopping 200 feet from the perimeter fence. 9 men walked away from Ruthie that day. Campbell survived his wounds after extensive surgery. Boyer was extracted from the ball turret with only minor injuries. Even Foley's leg wounds proved non-fatal. Red Morgan received the Medal of Honor on January 24, 1944, in a ceremony at 8th Bomber Command Headquarters in High Wycombe, England. Lieutenant General Ira C. Eaker, commanding general of the 8th Air Force, personally pinned the medal on Morgan's uniform. The citation reading took nearly 5 minutes, describing in clinical detail what Morgan had achieved through sheer determination and skill. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while participating in a bombing mission over enemy-occupied France on February 1, 1943. Second Lieutenant Morgan's exemplary courage, coolness and skill in flying his badly damaged aircraft over 180 miles of open water, and his determination in landing the crippled bomber rather than ordering his crew to bail out, saved the lives of his entire crew and prevented the loss of valuable combat equipment. The ceremony was attended by Morgan's entire crew, including Robert Campbell, who had spent 3 months in military hospitals recovering from his wounds. Campbell walked with difficulty, his jaw wired shut, speaking through clenched teeth. When Eaker shook his hand, Campbell managed 4 words: "He saved us all." The Army Air Forces studied Morgan's flight extensively, dispatching a technical investigation team to RAF Ludum to examine Ruthie's wreckage. What they found astonished even experienced aviation engineers. The number 3 engine pylon had melted through 70% of its attachment points. The engine had been hanging from the wing by essentially 2 bolts. The main wing spar showed heat damage that reduced its load-bearing capacity by an estimated 40%. 3 of the 4 primary control cables had been severed or damaged. The rudder had been operating at perhaps 30% effectiveness. The engineering report concluded that this aircraft remained controllable during flight is remarkable. That it was successfully landed demonstrates piloting skill of the highest order, combined with intimate knowledge of aircraft handling characteristics under extreme damage conditions. The resulting training document, Analysis of Emergency Flight Control in Catastrophically Damaged Heavy Bombardment Aircraft, became required reading at every bomber training base. Morgan's techniques, using engine power for directional control, maintaining speed to preserve control authority, accepting unconventional landing parameters, became standard instruction for dealing with catastrophic damage. More importantly, Morgan's decision not to order bailout became a case study in command decision-making. The Air Force analyzed similar situations where crews had bailed out from aircraft that might have been flyable, and where pilots had attempted to save unflyable aircraft with fatal results. Morgan's judgment, assessing his crew's condition, the aircraft's capabilities, and the odds of survival under different scenarios, became the gold standard for emergency decision-making under combat conditions. Morgan flew 26 missions total before completing his tour in August 1943. He rotated home to a hero's welcome, participated in war bond tours, and spent the remainder of the war as a flight instructor at Midland Army Airfield in Texas, where he trained hundreds of bomber pilots in survival techniques. After the war, Morgan returned to Vernon, Texas, married his childhood sweetheart, and ran a successful cattle ranch. He rarely spoke publicly about the mission that earned him America's highest military decoration, deflecting praise with characteristic modesty. His Medal of Honor hung in a simple frame in his study, surrounded by photographs of his crew, all 9 men who had survived that impossible flight. At reunions of the 92nd Bomb Group, Morgan was invariably surrounded by younger veterans who wanted to shake the hand of the man who'd proven that courage and skill could overcome impossible odds. He always insisted that any pilot would have done the same. "The medal isn't for doing something extraordinary," he told a reporter in 1987. "It's for doing what needed to be done. Those boys trusted me to get them home. I couldn't let them down." When asked in his final interview in 1990, months before his death from cancer at age 75, why he'd risked everything to save his crew when regulations and common sense dictated bailout, Morgan's answer was simple and direct. "They were my boys. You don't leave your boys behind. Not while you can still fly. Not while there's any chance at all. That's not heroism. That's just what you do when you're responsible for other men's lives." John Kerry "Red" Morgan died on November 18, 1991. His funeral in Vernon, Texas, was attended by 5 of his original crew members, all of whom credited him with giving them the lives they'd lived for nearly 50 years after that February day over the North Sea. Robert Campbell, who had been given less than a 10% chance of survival from his head wounds, lived until 2003. He kept a photograph of Morgan on his desk until the day he died. Beneath it was a simple inscription: "The man who wouldn't quit."